Now, I'm going to, you've heard from 5 very prominent people who've all thought about this. I'm going to ask anybody here in the audience, have they missed out anything? Is there anything that's left out? Is there something you think needs to be added to this definition or some elaborated? Anything that you've heard? Anybody want to speak up? Think there's anything that they might want to add to that? Yeah, please.
So maybe Fiona, if I can take that one, or you want at the end?
Is there another comment to come up? Yes? And then we'll respond. Anybody can respond.
From the perspective of our experience in Yemen, marginal lands are unique features. They're fragile environments, and they require very careful interventions. Also, they are site production of crops and livestock, forages. I'll give you an example of one site in Tehran, where a huge amount of area under sand dune farmers adopted through a long history of experience farming systems that are suitable for this type of environment, and we in research could not intervene in this environment to improve or to suggest alternative, because the system has been well established and well adapted to government conditions to produce food, produce forests. As a matter of fact, the amount of rainfall there is very, very little. But the agricultural practices, the type of crops grown, allow them to gain rain once every 4 years and get forages, even if there is crop failure. Intervention from our side to improve the situation in this case, we could not find varieties that can cope with this type of environment. We can find also agricultural practices that can help. We just have to preserve the type of practices that are provided by farmers and respect that. I would help them to provide regular seeds, help them in marketing products, help them in selling their animals. But as agricultural practices in this environment, there was unique experience developed over hundreds of years, where farmers were able to cultivate these crops under very harsh conditions and were able to gain income from this environment.
So I think that's a good point about the careful management. One more addition to what's been said about marginal environments, the definition, and then we'll have our panel will respond.
Thank you. I am Agustin from Indonesia Farmers Organization. I just want to ask for a clarification. Is the marginal land is the land with when the land is degraded, the fertility of the land is degraded, and also the land that has low potentials of fertility. My question is it the same? Considered as marginal line.
Okay. All right. Ismahan, did you want to take that first one about natural or anthropogenic?
Yeah, so I think for us at least, and those we know are growing as we go, especially with the mismanagement that Sam was talking about, as well as the climate change effect.
Okay. And degraded, low potential, the question, anybody want to respond to that? Dino, yeah, and then maybe Timothy.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't have to be low potential, and it definitely doesn't have to be degraded. I mean, I've been in Central America highlands recently. This is a marginal area because the people are socially excluded. They have excellent soils and excellent rainfall, but they're just too far away from the markets for them to be essentially productive. And so I don't think that you need to think of it in those physical terms. You have to think as well as in economic and in social terms.
Tim, did you want to add to that?
And if I could add to what Dino just said, I think we need to reconsider the notion of marginality and marginal environments. Marginal environments are not doomed to remain marginal. There are measures that can be taken to actually reverse the marginal situation in those areas. And there are novel technical innovations as well as socioeconomic institutional arrangements that can actually turn around what is a marginal environment now to a productive environment. Some of them are very costly and expensive to implement, but I think the good thing is that it's reversible. At least it hasn't reached the stage that the degradation has become irreversible. Once you haven't reached that tipping point, there is a possibility to bring about a change. And the other thing, which this gentleman from Yemen mentioned also, is communities that are living in this area have over the years evolved ways of actually managing the land as much as possible. So you find, even in arid areas, pockets of oases where people grow food crops for export on a very profitable basis. So I think the whole essence is to look for ways, both technical, socioeconomic, and institutional, to bring about a change in what is now termed marginal environment.
Okay, I'm going to pose a question because it's a great segue. We've talked about sort of the economics as well. Sam, from your perspective, are there possible economic benefits for farming in marginal environments? What might they be, and how can they be realized by farm families living in these areas?
Okay, thanks, Fiona. I think if you consider what kind of investments you have to make on a given land to be able to make it productive and economically viable, marginal lands are not economically as viable as lands that have much higher potential. However, having said that, with a certain level of investment, you can make them reasonably productive to the extent where given the market conditions, the conditions for food security, they can be economically viable. You can, for example, invest in areas such as irrigation, small-scale irrigation, the use of integrated soil fertility management, where you bring in both organic and inorganic inputs, where you improve the quality of the soil and the productivity of the soil. You can incorporate more complex production systems like agroforestry to both maintain the quality and the productivity of the soil, but at the same time as also have diverse products or outputs from your land. You can also invest in things like physical structures, whether if it's on sloping land, things like bunds and terraces and what have you, to really improve the quality of it so that you can improve the productivity of it. And in the context of Ethiopia, for example, one of the areas that we spoke about, the PSNP, the Productive Safety Net Program, does a lot of investment in physical structures in these marginal areas. And we have had significant improvement in the quality of land and the productivity of land as a result of that. Another area is this community-based watershed management, where using area enclosures and the like, the ability to produce fodder for feed and the use in livestock has been very successful. And so, yes, definitely it is possible to make them economically beneficial. You just need bit more by way of both management and input to be able to do so.
Yeah, so you've talked, and yet when we talked about marginal environments, we talked about some of the socioeconomic constraints as well, sort of, the capacity, exclusion. So would you see investments in those areas as well as being necessary to go along with that as well?
Correct, definitely. A lot of marginal areas also have poorer people managing them as a result, partly of the natural resource that they have. So the investment, both in terms of the types of extension, for example, and the types of information that you bring to these to be able to make them more productive, and also the types of institutional arrangements that you make, whether it's in terms of availability of credit, availability of, again, this safety net that I mentioned earlier, to be able to address this, that also has to be brought into the whole equation to address.
Okay. Well, Dino, I mean, you know vegetables and inside out, and you do a lot of work with your center on vegetables in marginal areas, and some maybe not so marginal, but certainly in those marginal areas for poor farming families. From your perspective on the value of vegetables, both in the diets, so we're talking the nutrition side, as well as the livelihoods of farmers, how can marginal environments contribute meaningfully in this regard?
Well, first of all, we take the general case, which isn't to do with marginal environments, but in terms of consumption. We know that the World Health Authority recommends that we all eat 400 grams of fruit and vegetables a day, but I wonder how many people in this room have any clear idea of what that means. What does it look like? Well, we have a good example now that if you in fact have 400 grams of fruit and vegetables, fresh weight, it's about the equivalent of a World Cup football. And actually that's quite a lot. So not so many of us in fact do eat what the World Health Authority recommends, but the consequences of not eating that are quite severe in two ways. I mean, if you are in a very marginal environment and are faced with undernutrition or malnutrition, then the consequences are clear. We've all heard about stunting and reduced IQ and these types of things. Less than 200 grams of vegetables available per day means a very rapid increase in child mortality, for example. So we have that dimension. On the other side of the fact, the recent research in the UK by Oyebode et al., 2013, looking at one of these very large medical surveys, looking at results from about 65,000 people, very clearly says that if you don't, or if you do eat enough fruit and vegetables in your diet a day, your chances of getting certain cancers are significantly reduced, and your chances of cardiovascular disease are very significantly reduced. So there seems to me there's two good reasons there for us to be eating a sensible, balanced diet with a diversity of fruit and vegetables. And I wish to be controversial now, and I've been controversial at lunchtime, but I'm going to say the same thing again, is that orange flesh sweet potato is not enough. We have to have a whole range of vegetables and a whole range of fruits in our diet, and if we don't do that, we won't be coping with appropriate malnutrition. I also suggest that there are a couple of examples of where marginality really helps economic productivity. So if you have a very high mountainous environment, for example, you might think this is so marginal it's not worth it. But if you can grow seed potato without virus, this is a way to make big money. And in fact, people look for these particular places in order to be able to produce seed potato. Alternatively, in Mali, for example, we have our onion breeding program. We have our onion breeding program there because it's sufficiently dry that we can produce onion seed appropriately. And if it's anything more moist than that, it's not going to be effective in terms of the production of onion seed. So you shouldn't look at it necessarily in generic terms. It's very crop specific, and you can take advantage of certain environmental conditions if you know what you're doing.